Welcome back to Small Caps. My name's Kerry Stevenson. I'm bringing you something a little bit different today, all the way from Amsterdam. Can you guess? It's Amsterdam. Domenic Carosa. He is coming from Amsterdam. I'm talking to Domenic. He is the founder and executive director, CEO and executive director of Crowd Media. Now, I've been talking a little bit to Domenic off camera just about the fact that I'm not a millennial. Ladies and gentlemen, this is very much a millennial company, but once I got to understand a little bit more, it's fascinating what you guys are up to. It's conversational commerce. It's a really interesting company. So let's start, Domenic, by introducing Crowd Media. Who are you and what makes you a little bit different from everybody out there? And I'd also like to know what's an Aussie doing in Amsterdam? Love that background.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Kerry. Born and bred in Melbourne. The heart's still very much in Australia, but moved over here about 5 years ago, just to be as close to our customers as possible. So Crowd's been listed for 5 years. We've been running for almost 10 years in the space. And maybe before I sort of get into what Crowd does, I can just try and paint the picture, because I just think it's important to look at, what are some of the key trends that are now starting to happen in the marketplace, and what does the future actually look like? First of all, if you talk about millennials, millennials are no longer watching television. They are on their mobile, glued to their mobile phones, watching Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat to a degree. And so the way that millennials are now consuming content is very different to the prior generation. So that's one thing. Second of all, e-commerce is absolutely booming. And so this is obviously a major growth area, really exacerbated by the COVID crisis over the last 12 months. People are now becoming much more accustomed to purchasing via their tablet or via their mobile phone. And if I talk about conversational commerce, this is where we believe is the next step, the next evolution in e-commerce and in influencer marketing. And that is really allowing consumers to have one-to-one conversations with a character on a website, a digital person on the other side, and actually having a conversation that ultimately can lead to an e-commerce transaction or some kind of transaction. And that's really and Crowd is very much at the forefront of this new evolution.
When you say conversational commerce, why is that different, and why is it better than the way people are doing e-commerce right now? And is this the future? Is that what you're saying? That the pandemic has actually, I always say to people, the pandemic has brought us the future into the present, and people are getting more familiar with online. But do they need conversational commerce? Isn't e-commerce enough?
It's really the next evolution. And so if we just even take a couple of steps back and just look at influencer marketing, and there's this term of influencer marketing banning around, and what does it actually mean?
Yeah.
And so influencer marketing is just really another form of product placement. And so I'm sure people have seen an influencer, they're holding up an iPhone, holding up a product saying, the great new, iPhone 12, it's got X, Y, Z, go and buy it from the Apple store, as an example. I mean, that's just a very simple example. That's not too dissimilar from how it was done. I'm going to say the olden days. It wasn't actually that long ago.
Be careful, because I remember those days.
For example, James Bond movie. He drove the Aston Martin. That was basically another example of product placement, but how it was done in the olden days, where people used to physically go to the movies or watch television. So influencer marketing is just really the next evolution of what we would term product placement within television adverts or TV programs. And so the next evolution, so if we're now looking at, and influencer marketing has been around for 5-6 years, Crowd has been very much at the forefront, but influencer marketing is changing once again. And without wanting to get all sort of techie and nerdy on everyone, the algorithms are changing on Instagram and TikTok. And so that's one trend. The other trend is people are yearning to have one-to-one conversations. So if you're an influencer, you're someone who's got a lot of followers on Instagram, for example, you will have people constantly sending you a message. And you as the influencer, you're lucky if you can respond to 1 out of 10 or 1 out of 50 messages. I mean, if you're a Kim Kardashian, you'd never respond to anyone. And this is where the whole notion of, in fact, the announcement that we've made today, specifically around the whole talking head concept and conversational commerce is going, ultimately allowing you as the consumer to have a one-to-one conversation with your favorite influencer and actually having that one-to-one conversation, a virtual influencer, which is basically, think of that as a mini me of, for example, I'm a Formula One fan, Lewis Hamilton. So now to have a conversation with Lewis Hamilton and asking him about the race last weekend. And then as part of that process, he is able to say, hey, by the way, I've got 20 exclusive signed T-shirts. Can I put your name down for one, Dominic? So it's that kind of new way of selling that, transcends just, going to a flat website, clicking a few buttons and actually buying something. And that is, in our view, the future of influencer marketing and the future of e-commerce. And, and the term that we use and the industry uses, and that is conversational commerce.
Well, that makes a whole lot of sense because it's actually a lot more engaging, isn't it? Because as you said before, it's a very flat environment at the moment, click a few buttons and, if I know I'm not a millennial, clearly, but for me, I still want to go and have that interaction. So crowd media is saying the future. I just want to take a step back if I could. Dominic, what's your background that you understand this market so well?
Good question. So I've been involved. I'll put up my hand and say I'm a nerd. I'm a tech nerd from the 90s. Well, actually, even before that, the 80s. So I've basically grown up with tech. I love tech, but I also love the business aspect. And really, I guess my own personal secret sauce and my love is really combining business and technology and really trying to see what's next, what's over the horizon with regards to what are people going to be doing in the future. And so, if I look at where we are at Crowd, and I should sort of mention, obviously I'm the CEO and I'm one of the key stakeholders, but we also have a board, a gentleman called Stephen Shapira, who joined us about 12 months ago. He was the founder of Becca Cosmetics, which he sold for a reasonable sum of money a number of years ago. And Robert Quant, who was also the COO, CFO at Invincible Brands, which is an influencer-led company out of Germany. Very, very successful. In fact, they sold, that particular business for, let's call it a very big sum recently. And so we've got a board that has, deep experience around brands, around influencer marketing, and really, from my perspective, around technology. So influencer marketing and tech. And it's really bringing the experience of all of us together to really try and understand what's next. It's great to be doing what everyone else is doing today with e-commerce shops. And sure, we've got a number of e-commerce shops and we're selling across Europe, which is part of the reason why I'm based out of Amsterdam. But, part of our role in the company is to ask what's actually next, what's over the horizon. And we believe that, we call it the Talking Head. The announcement today is really our first push into this space. We released a beta version of our Talking Head, which works with one of our recently launched brands called MD Complete, which is a skincare brand. And the Talking Head, her name's Emma, and she'll basically try and understand who you are as a person and then make recommendations, because there's a whole bunch of products, make recommendations on what is the right product for you. So it's that one-to-one conversation that then leads to a commercial transaction. And it's not too dissimilar. If I want to sort of, let's say the old way of doing it, you'd walk into in the Australian example, into a David Jones or a Myer, you'd walk onto the ground floor and there'd be all these people and with these counters, and you'd walk around and you'd have a conversation and they'd say, actually, this is the best thing for you, or why don't you try this? It's the same concept, but in the digital virtual world. And now that, given that we're all now accustomed to buying things in the virtual world, this is really just taking what we used to do in the physical world and just adapting it for the digital world. And so this one-to-one conversation is where we think the future is. And the reason, and in fact, I should just sort of close the loop with regards to Stephen and Robert, one of the key reasons that they and their group invested in us about 12 months ago is the technology platform, the AI-driven Q&A, question-answer chatbot technology that we've built and have been monetizing over the last 10 years. In fact, over the last 10 years, we've had questions and answers, over 180 million questions and answers have been processed through our platform. And why it's unique, it uses a combination of AI, artificial intelligence. We actually call her Cara. She's basically our AI bot that answers all of those questions. And it's roughly 65% of all questions are answered by Cara. And then the other 35% are actually answered by humans. So our technology is one that it's basically hybrid. It allows both a combination of AI as well as human answering those particular questions. And that's actually very unique. And that we plug into the virtual chatbot, the talking head that you'll be able to see. There's a link in the announcement. And that is really the first, and we've released it just to really give our investors and our stakeholders and ultimately some of our customers access to what we think the future actually looks like. And it's that conversational commerce, and, sure, can it be improved? Undoubtedly, but, we've sort of brought this forward. We're basically 12 months ahead of schedule.
Wow.
We've basically been putting all the building blocks together, and in effect, it works. And now it's really about scaling this up in a much, much more aggressive manner. And we've made, apart from launching our first talking head, we've also got 2 strategic alliances with Unique, as well as a joint venture with a company out of Israel.
So sorry, just explain to me, who are Unique?
So we've signed 2 strategic partnerships, one with Unique, which is a New Zealand-based company.
Okay.
That is in the, let's call it in the, partly chatbot, partly AI space. And so we're collaborating with them. And then secondly, with an Israeli-based company who actually created one of the world's first virtual digital influencers. That's a bit of a mouthful, but what that actually means is you've seen all these influencers on Instagram, like they're real people. They've actually created effectively a digital version of a human. And, she's actually called Zoe, and she's a digital influencer, and she's got tens of thousands of followers on Instagram.
Really?
Yes, and that is where the market is moving towards. And so we're working with them because they've got a very specific skill around creating. I mean, there's a whole bunch of work around 3D modeling and the animation. So we're working with them specifically in a 50-50 joint venture to be able to create a scalable platform so we can roll out all of these talking heads in a much more efficient manner, because doing it today, it will take 1 month, 2 months to actually create a talking head. My view is for this to truly be a scalable platform, we need to be able to roll out a talking head, 1 or 2 a day. And so we're working with them on creating a platform that will allow us to roll this out. And I've spoken about e-commerce, and e-commerce for me, it's an obvious one, the one-to-one conversation, and then there's a transaction. But, if I sort of look at even my own personal self, even just my children, as an example, I've talked to them, and, they'd love to, they're into science and all those kinds of things. They'd actually love to have a conversation with Einstein because they've seen Einstein everywhere. And so really the next evolution is really educational. So you can take the same crowd, AI-based Q&A platform, you can take the talking head, the virtual talking head, and then apply that to education. And so imagine having a conversation with Einstein
Be
and
amazing.
and learning from him in a digital world. Obviously, he's no longer in this current world, but that just gives you, I guess, some insight into where this technology can go. And this is why I'm actually so excited about it, because the possibilities are actually endless. And sure, we're going to start with commerce.
Yeah, Domenic, I just have to ask you this. Obviously, crowd media, you've done these strategic alliances. Are there other people doing something similar to you, or is there a fairly high bar to entry? Is it quite complex to get these AI and the algorithms and all of this pushed together to create something that you have created?
There are a small number of companies who are trying to get traction in the space. We at Crowd, in fact, we signed 2 deals today. At the same time, a couple of months ago, we signed a deal with a group out of the UK called Forever Holdings. And in fact, we also made a small strategic investment in them. And they've basically created effectively virtual influencers, and they've targeted, I won't really call it the educational sector. And in fact, also within the announcement, there's a link. They've created, let's call it a real life talking head of a number of Holocaust survivors. Because unfortunately, most of the Holocaust survivors are basically dying off due to old age, and so they've actually created a technology that allows them to effectively memorialize those Holocaust survivors, so that way they can live in the digital world forever. And in fact, we're working with them on a number of cooperations across Europe to leverage their tech, to leverage our crowd Q&A technology. So, for us, we just see where the future is. We're building it ourselves, but at the same time, we're forming either strategic alliances or making investments into the other players that are also involved in the space. And that means we have a seat at the table, because we know that influencer marketing is changing. We know that this is the future of conversational commerce. It means that Crowd, as a small ASX company, will have a seat at the table of this tectonic shift that is currently occurring. That's the strategy.
And speaking of the strategy, with these deals with the companies like Unique, just talk me through the structure of those deals. Is it a joint venture? How's that been set up?
It varies. So if I take Forever Holdings, which was signed a number of months ago, we took a strategic stake, i.e. we made an investment. The Unique deal at this particular point in time is just a strategic partnership. We're working together around digital ambassadors. We may make an investment in them at the appropriate point in time, but not today. Right. And then the Zoe joint venture, we will be making an investment, and that will be a 50-50 partnership. So we've really decided to look at, who are the, let's call it the leading players in the space. Where can we leverage the 10 years of technology experience, around our Q&A chatbot tech that we can effectively apply and leverage with each of these partnerships. And I mean, for example, if I take the Talking Head joint venture that we announced today, being able to create a number of, let's call it talking heads in a very, very scalable way. I know that the guys at Forever Holdings are actually in discussions with some of the large record labels around basically creating talking heads for some of their large artists, both living and no longer living. And wow. So that's how we can take some of the tech that we've got on one hand and leverage it in one of the other companies that we're involved in. And so really it's a collaboration of entrepreneurs, and we're really, in my view, trying to be the hub of this new change.
I want to go into the commercial again, but before I do, I just have to share this with everybody that's listening, because I love this. This is the crowd media philosophy, ladies and gentlemen. I love this because it's kind of what you've been talking about. The future belongs to those who see opportunity before it becomes apparent. Is that correct? I think that was before it becomes obvious, not apparent.
You've got the general gist.
Nearly got it. Which I think is fascinating, because that's what you're doing. You're looking into the future and saying, we'll make it apparent today or obvious today. commercially, how does it work? Are you have you got revenue at this stage, or is it all about building the platform and building the bot and building the characters like the Zoes and the Karas?
Yeah. So sure, we got revenue. We generated just over 16 mil of revenue last financial year. So there's certainly revenue in the business. But the real, in my view, I'm not really well, I am obviously interested in revenue as a CEO. Who wouldn't be interested in revenue? But I'm really I'm looking over the horizon. I'm not just looking at the revenue next quarter or next calendar year. I'm really looking at what's the potential of the technology that we're creating in the next 2, 3, 4 years. And if we can effectively increase the e-commerce pie with our conversational commerce talking head, what's that worth? And not just on our own websites. Like, that's great doing it on our own websites. And for me, that's really just a proof of concept. I mean, there's in the tech world, there's an analogy or saying, you say you've got to eat your own dog food. So, we are effectively consuming what we're creating, because if we don't consume what we create, why are we creating it? So we are consuming that, and then ultimately being able to take that conversational commerce talking head, the AI platform, and imagine rolling this out to some of the largest e-commerce sites in the world, rolling this out to the top 5,000 or the top 10,000 Instagram influencers or the top 10,000 TikTok influencers. That's ultimately the long-term value of where the business is. And so we're creating a technology platform that, in our view and in my view, will facilitate the next iteration of commerce, of conversational commerce.
And not just conversational commerce, we're talking marketing. We're talking about brands that would want to get involved, wouldn't they, in something like this, if they can reach out in, as you said right at the beginning, that conversational commerce, instead of being, tap a few things on your keyboard, you're actually going to have a conversation with someone. So I could imagine, are you looking and speaking with some big brands about understanding this market?
We've actually already had a number of brands approach us wanting to be part of the, let's call it the pilot program. We've decided for now we're just going to focus on our own brands, just to make sure that, as I said, we're 12 months ahead of schedule. It's in beta, and as you can see from the video, it's pretty good, but it's not like you and I having a conversation. But that's ultimately where it's going to go, and so the technology is just starting to catch up with regards to allowing this to actually occur. At the same time, from a consumer's perspective, consumers are now much more comfortable in buying things online, either on their laptop or their mobile phone. So, effectively, as I say, the stars are all aligning. We still have a lot of work ahead of us with regards to really making this a reality. But I believe, very strongly, we have the right team at the board level. We have the right team in terms of the management and the technology, as well as that, our strategic partners, the 3 strategic partners specifically in the space, which we've announced today, as well as announced a number of months ago.
Okay, so that's great. Now I'm going to put the investor hat on and say, and I didn't mention this at the start, I'll tell you, ladies and gentlemen, now, the ASX code is C for Charlie, M for Mother, number 8, CM8 is the ASX code. Why should investors be looking at Crowd Media listed on the ASX at this time and put their hard-earned money into Crowd Media? I mean, obviously, you're its biggest fan, but, sitting here, what is the, I guess, the argument for this? We're only just starting. We've only just begun.
Yeah. I mean, just for the record, obviously, I'm not going to provide anyone financial advice, but actually, that's actually an opportunity, a digital talking head that actually provides financial advice. But we can talk about that at another point in time. Why? Because Crowd gives investors access and exposure to influencer marketing, this new way of conversational commerce. And as far as I'm aware, we are maybe only 1 or 2 listed companies anywhere around the world that will actually give investors access. So if you believe that millennials and them are going to continue being glued to their mobile phone, and not just millennials, even Gen Z. If you believe that e-commerce is going to continue increasing, if you believe that influencer marketing is as another form of product placement is only going to continue growing, then I think the decision at that point is pretty obvious. Obviously, without providing any advice. And yes, I am a big advocate, and at the same time, I'm also a big shareholder of the company as well, because I do believe in what we're doing. So, really, in summary, I don't even know where our market cap is today. I think we're micro cap.
Yep.
We still have a long way to go in terms of continuing to build the company. And I think, today, if you look at it today, it's really an opportunity for investors to get involved at that ground level, really in the early days as the company, continues growing and evolving.
Well, it's certainly, I've not heard of you before, so it's been fantastic to chat with you today because, boy, hasn't the world changed even in a year? But I think crowd media, it sounds like, as I said, you're inking deals, you're getting involved with other companies that have also got their eye on the prize, I guess. But it's been really interesting talking to you. We'll be delighted to have a chat early next year, because it sounds to me like you've got a lot of things happening and a great strong board and management to take you along the way. Final question. Are you well funded?
Yeah, we are. We've got some very supportive investors, and so we're very comfortable at this particular point in time. And really, one of the questions that actually you asked right at the start, why Amsterdam?
Yes.
And I think, first of all, Australia, I was born and bred in Melbourne. Australia is very close to my heart, but I realised that in order to be able to target and access the European market, I physically needed to be in the time zone. And I mean, just to give you an example, in our office, we speak over a dozen different languages. And so to be able to deal with customers in Germany, France, Italy, Spain, Hungary, et cetera, we need to have people who are in the region, who understand the nuances of the cultures, and obviously understand the language. It's really a key criteria. And being able to actually do it from here, as opposed to Australia, is significantly much easier, which is why I decided almost 5 years ago to basically, pick up the family, relocate over here, just to be as close to the action as possible.
Well, Domenic, I got to say, I can think of worse places to be than Amsterdam. And you know what? You've probably dodged a lot of tough times for the poor old Victorians at the moment. So not being in Melbourne this year has probably been a big blessing, I would suggest. It's been delightful to chat to you. I wish you all the best. And where can people, if they want to go and, is there anywhere that people can see Zoe or Cara or check in with those, or even just to have a little bit of a look?
First thing is the crowdmedia.com website, crowdmedia.com. We'll be posting, obviously the announcement has been posted and there are links within that announcement. At the same time, if you search for Crowd Media on YouTube, we have a number of videos on YouTube as well that basically get into that next level of detail. And, effectively being a social company, we obviously put everything out there for our investors and stakeholders to go and have a look.
Fantastic. Nicely rounded up. Thank you very much for talking to us from Amsterdam. Domenic Carosa, thank you so much.
Thank you, Kerry.